here I'd like to just kind of give you an idea of a use case. Once we started looking at different methodologies, I stumbled across Goldfire quite luckily when I was benchmarking at Boeing about a year ago. They brought it up to me and showed me how it worked, and I wanted to test it within our own system. So this particular use case here that I'm going to talk about happened probably about a month ago, and one of our engineers in our Orion project wanted to look up information on an upright landing system for their Orion rocket based on information they could find on the Apollo. See, the landing system had a partial failure. They wanted to see if something in the Apollo was used similar upright system, if they could find a way to improve upon their current design based on the information they had in the Apollo. The current way of doing that without going through Goldfire was they literally had to talk to a librarian. The librarian had to search through all the Apollo history and all the other history documents we have to try to find information in that. The librarian spent a full day looking for information within those documents to see if they could help this Orion engineer. So what I want to show you here is what the librarian had to deal with. This is our current infrastructure of how they try to find information. Very similar, keyword-based, looking at information, and as I look through it, maybe 3 of those documents actually came from the history office. The rest were from documents from all over the place within that. It could have been headquarters, could have been images. So they weren't looking at repository specific, and it was very difficult to find that information. In order to find out whether that document was relevant, the librarian or the engineer would have to open that document, try to find that passage of that snippet, and see whether that information was viable. And many of these documents were anywhere from 20 to 200 pages long, so it would have taken them a long time to try to find that information. So I asked them if we could use Goldfire to index that information. Well, let me back up a little bit here, just so you can understand what the current results were. That they, out of that full 8 hours searching, they found 12 documents within that database. They weren't sure whether they were relevant or not because somebody still had to go through and read them. They looked through some other files that they had in there within the history office, and then with the oral histories, they found a few other things that may have been helpful. Well, all in all, it was a total bust for 8 hours of work during that time frame, and they would have needed another 3 or 4 hours to go through that information to see if anything was relevant. So we used Goldfire to look at the same information, and I've kind of highlighted a few things that stood out for our end users. First off, on the top, you see where a user can save their alerts as well as save their queries, so they can go back to it, look at it later on. As John mentioned earlier, we can do repository specific, so the end user, instead of choosing the entire index, was able to specify just the history office with the Apollo information in there. On the left-hand side, they could do the facet, and on the right-hand side, it's where it's a little bit more the focused information where we can cluster down to different types of definitions, parts and functions, and really dig deep into those documents to try to find what was useful for the engineer. And in the center, you have your standard data set return, which gave the engineer a good idea of what the information was. And with the built-in plug-in that comes with this, the engineer was able to go directly to the line that was listed in the summary. So instead of having to go and try to read 234 pages, it took him directly to page 56 where that information was found. Engineer was astounded at this point just because he didn't have to read so much information, and he was able to find good relevant information quickly, and it helped him. And as you can see from this image here, this was a document again that was scanned in almost 40 years ago from a PDF readable document. So it was very interesting to him that we were able to get something that old up there that he could actually work through on a textual search. So the Goldfire results, as we went through this, we scanned over 62 gigabytes of information, and that took me probably about 4 hours. Would have been faster if I had a much more powerful machine, but it was really a proof of concept here, so we were using development equipment. The engineer, like I said, was very happy with the results. On the first results, quite often they got relevant information right away, and they found well over 200 contextually relevant documents. And from what I understand from the engineer, 9 of those documents look very promising to help them find an answer. They're still working on it. We don't know whether they found the answer, but it was a lot more detailed results back to the engineer that was very helpful for them. So in summary, as we look through this, the preliminary research, it took 8 hours and another 3 or 4 hours of actually determining whether the user could make any kind of use of that information that was there, and it really returned nothing. So 12 hours lost for both an engineer and for a librarian. When we utilized the Goldfire search, we were able to find hundreds of contextually relevant documents, 9 that were very helpful within the first 3 hours. And again, the engineer was able to go in there and start working right away to try to see if he can find a solution. I'm hoping within the next month I can report back that he found a good solution that will actually save the government dollars and how to say make this upright system a little bit better as we go forward in our project.